everybody. Welcome back to Creative Dirt. I'm your host, Honor Taryn Teague, and this is a podcast and community all about cultivating creativity in your everyday life. So today we are finally getting into the nitty-gritty about self-care, specifically creative self-care, and we are going to talk about art as therapy today. I'm so excited that you decided to join us. So when you guys go to an art museum and you see the art and you experience it, does it make sense to you? Because a lot of times I feel like I have no idea what I'm looking at. When I go to an art museum, I like to look at it, look at the art and appreciate it and like make up a story of like what I think the artist is trying to say, even if I have no idea what it's talking about. So art can sometimes be very like unapproachable if you're like experiencing it, but when you're making it, it definitely is not unapproachable because it's all sort of about what you want to create and what you want to say. So art has often been referred to as exercise for the brain, if you didn't know. And it's interesting because when we think about exercise, it's not just something that's reserved for the people who are really good at it. Everybody needs exercise. So not just Olympians are exercising. Michael Phelps is not the only person in the world who swims. But a lot of people get to do it because it's good for you. And it's the same thing as creating art. Everyone should be able to do it and should be able to enjoy doing it because it's good for you. We shouldn't just leave that to the professional artists to do. So I wonder why we don't think about that in society. Like, why are we not treating art as exercise if it is exercise for our brains? So there was a study done that looked at 28 retirement age people, and it took half the people and put them in a make art group, and the other half of the people and put them in a appreciate art group. So they were just like going to museums, looking at art, that kind of stuff. And it tracked both groups over 10 weeks. And after that 10 weeks, it actually showed that the brain function in the group that was creating art led to a lot more psychological resilience. If that's not improving the brain and exercising the brain, what is? So think about how much you're exposed to art, whether it's through, social media or even billboards, or think about how much you're exposed to art, and then also think about how much time you spend creating it. And I would bet that for most people, we spend a lot more of our time being exposed to art as compared to actually creating it. So that's why this episode today is all about encouraging you to get creative. We're talking to an amazing art therapist. Her name is Gillian Pulley. She practices here in Nashville. And I'm so excited to learn a little bit more about art therapy with her and to share that with you guys today. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in. Let's get messy.
Gillian,
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you.
We're here.
Our eyes are like,
Okay, I'm so excited. I have a super basic question for you.
Okay.
What is art therapy?
Art therapy it's actually not as simple
Okay,
as you would think.
I'm glad because I was like, is this stupid to ask?
No, very good question. So art therapy is psychotherapy, essentially done with artistic materials. So we're using paint, oil pastels, drawing, any kind of medium really to kind of pull out what's inside of someone.
Okay.
Going beyond the verbal, right? So
Yes.
those moments when you're like, I don't know how I feel, but right?
Yeah.
Like we were talking about earlier with colors and you were like, why do you like magenta? And I said, magenta feels like summer to me. It's kind of like that, right?
Okay.
You can have more context for what you're feeling. Like, I don't know what it is, but it feels like this color, it feels like this shape or this line kind of represents what I'm experiencing.
Okay. That's cool. So it seems like art therapy sort of can better match with your feelings as opposed to like words, especially English words, because there's only so many,
Absolutely. Yeah. It's great
cool.
for like narrating.
Okay.
Right?
I love that.
And kind of digging deeper because sometimes you just don't know. And putting it outside of you helps you see it as well.
I love that. This is amazing. So another basic question for you.
Yes.
As we get started, why is art or how is art therapeutic?
Yeah, it kind of ties into all of those cathartic pieces, right? Like professional artists do it really well, right? Finding a topic or a subject that they want to learn about and then expressing that through art.
Okay.
Right? It allows you that release.
Oh, that sounds great.
And I think we think about it as a mindful thing, but sometimes it can be mindless as well. Like I just need to not think about something and let me be creative and, have something to feel proud of or have something to do that doesn't necessarily tie to perfection in any way or productivity.
Oh,
productivity. As we know it.
Yeah. It sucks, doesn't it? I love that. I think, okay, being totally candid here, I've been to an art therapist once I did like a couple sessions. It was super fun. Yeah. And then I don't know why I didn't continue to go. But anyways, I went to a couple sessions. I've also seen another therapist and she was like, hey, like, what are the things that you love to do? And I was like, oh, like I love crafting and creating. She was like, are you doing those things? And I was like, no. So like, why do we feel like art is like a last resort sometimes? I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are many reasons why we're like, oh, I love to do this thing and I never do it.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of times I think it's just focus elsewhere. Right. Especially if you're prioritizing other things. You're like, oh, well, I can't give myself something that I love or that I enjoy because I don't deserve that yet. Right. Instead of being like, oh, okay, well, I can designate time to this. And that actually widens my capacity for that thing that I hate to do or for that thing that's dragging my energy down.
Okay. So how does it widen the capacity for that? Just because you feel like...
Yeah, you're taking a break.
Take it on. Okay,
right?
Yeah.
You're taking a break. Just like when you take a nap and you're like, oh, I feel so good now.
Oh, I love that.
And I can go and I can do whatever else.
Yeah.
Your brain is taking a break. You're able to think about something else. And that actually leaves more space for you to come to solutions or, move through a blockage sometimes.
I love that. I feel like there's obviously been a lot of focus on hustle culture. And you mentioned productivity. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes I can have the best ideas or do the best work when I take a break. Like I have to have a minute and be like, I need to not do this. Yeah. And then things will come to me then. And I like that you mentioned too, like the mindlessness, air quotes, of doing art. I don't know. I feel like usually when I'm creating or drawing, I'm not thinking. It's just existing and putting pen to paper, and it's fun.
Yeah, that's the beauty.
Yeah. Okay, so how did you particularly come into this field? Have you always been an artistic person? How did we get from Gillian, the little gal, to Gillian, the art therapist?
I don't think I didn't see myself becoming an art therapist until the end of undergraduate. So I went to Lipscomb University for my psych major, and I was at the end. And I was like, there's no way I can sit with clients and come up with these groundbreaking, revolutionary questions that these people are coming up with. Like my teachers would be like, and then you ask blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, that's such a good question. That never would have occurred to me. That kind of led me to looking into other alternative therapeutic methods. Yes. And so my last semester, I took an art therapy class and I was like, oh, this is so great because I would not define myself as an artist, but it was opening in a way that I was like, okay, well, I can introduce the art to a person and I can make art with them and I can sit with them and they don't need to be an artist and they may feel better if I'm not like, yes, I've created these amazing works and now I just want to help people. Into being like, yes, I'm also not great at art and we can, let's doodle together and kind of explore what that's like for you.
I love that.
So that's how I got here. I was not confident in speaking as a native English speaker.
Yeah. It can be hard sometimes.
And said, let's have a third
person in the room. A crayon, Absolutely. I love that. That is so cool that you decided to jump into art therapy, not necessarily being a super artist, because I'm sure it does help break down a lot of barriers with some clients. Just them thinking like, oh, I have to be good at this and be good at that. And there's a lot of anxiety that comes with that. And being like, oh, how do I do art? I don't know.
Are you going to judge me?
Yeah.
Are you gonna judge my art? Is it good enough for this session?
Oh my gosh. Do you feel like clients that you have worked with feel that way at all? And how do you work with them through that?
Yeah, not so much anymore.
Okay.
it mostly shows up when I'm working with artists. Like because of the art therapy, sometimes, when I was starting out, more artists would like come to me and be like, okay, I'm at a block, or I want to, work through this thing, or this came up with this piece I'm making and I want to talk to you about it.
Okay.
And so having those conversations and being like, okay, well, where's the median, right? Because now that it has value, now that they've made it special, it is about the product. Because a lot of times in art therapy, we're like, oh, it's not about the product. It's not about what you've made. It's all about the process. Paralleling it with the process of life. We love that. But when someone really has already attached importance and value to what they've created, right, that shifts the perspective and it shifts how I'm going to discuss that. Right? And so working through that takes a different turn, and it is more talking in that way, or having them kind of pull out for themselves why there's significance there, right? What about it has brought up these other feelings? What's paralleling? What's laying underneath? The majority of my clients tend to be like overachieving athletes, or like highly achieving, highly achieving athletes, or entrepreneurs. Like a lot of my clients have started their own business or had an idea and brought that into fruition. So that's kind of my specialty, so to speak. And it plays out in, I guess, overly simplified, it's like anxiety, right? Working with anxiety on a higher level, where it's performance related, or trying to kind of mold their lives to reflect or change or shift based on what they've created their business to be.
I love that your clientele generally is like high achievers. And it's so cool to think that art is sort of the antidote to not necessarily high achieving, but just like the stress that comes with like going, achievement, like be number one. And art is like so the opposite of that in some ways. But it's still like kind of a form of achievement on its own. It's like you're doing something. But it doesn't have to be like you're being productive in a way, but it doesn't have to be used in a productive way. I don't know where I'm going with that, but you know what I mean.
Well, I think you're saying like you're creating, right? You're creating, which is an act, right? You're making something, you're putting something out there. And that relates to what they're doing, but they're able to more, like we were talking about before, turn their brain off while they're doing it. Like you can do the parts that feel good and allow the art to lead you into that without having to be like, oh, okay, now I have to do the taxes for right? That's a buzzkill. But that when you are high achieving, your brain's going and going and going and going and going, right? And so having that art does slow it down to being like, okay, now I can choose a color that I like.
That's cool.
Which color am I going to choose? Right? And being able to take the time and have the space to do that and have room for other things, because a lot of times you don't get to check in and check out when you have something that's your own that you're creating, right? You're just pouring in the hours to get the outcome that you're looking for. So
that's cool. And it seems like you have the opportunity to make simple decisions based off feeling, which as an achiever, it seems like a lot of your decisions are based off of, what's best, or what's the most profitable, or what's this or what's that. So
very analytical, very
analytical. So what does progress look like in art therapy? Does it mean getting better at art, or working through some things you might be going through?
Oh, I think it's so
nice pause.
I think I want to say both, right? But it's definitely not art class, right? Like I'm not teaching anyone how to use materials necessarily. It really is a position of like play. I try to keep my directives open and encourage that space of like safe play, essentially. So I think it's marked by the comfort with certain materials that allows for that space of like resolving, like you're saying, like, okay, I'm coming to a resolution and I've gotten there, and I'm also more comfortable with the material.
Okay. That's cool.
Right. So like the therapeutic material and the art material kind of becomes one sometimes. And so I think in my brain, that's why I'm like, and it's kind of both.
Yeah, that's cool. So as an example, I'm thinking it would be like, if you start out with a client, you'd have a piece of paper and you'd give them a prompt and they would like struggle with like creating whatever that thing is. Is that correct? And then over time it'd be like, okay, like you give me a prompt, like I can put this on paper. Is that where we're going? What you're thinking, or like not really?
Yes.
And
yeah. Yes. And I think it's that to an extent, but not necessarily that you would be like, I know exactly what I'm going to put down, but that you would be like, okay, I think I can work through this using art, right? Like I need another moment, but I want to explore in this way. And then I'm going to be able to work from there. Whereas, you know, more at the beginning, it is, or can be more of that like, all right, here's what I made and I hope this is okay and I hope you like it, right? And looking for that affirmation and that validation. Okay. And like, I made my stick figure, but does this give you what you need to, you know, give back to me as my therapist versus, okay, here's what I've created and let's look at it together. So I guess maybe moving more into like a leadership position for their narrative and owning that narrative as opposed to like looking to me to lead them through.
I love that. Wow. I feel like if I'm ever I've been in therapy before. I'm not currently. If I'm ever in therapy again, I'm going to see it through a whole new lens now. That's so cool. So also I'm hearing too, just like accepting the process and like you mentioned, like being comfortable with the process of the creation and working through things, which c'est la vie, like that's life. You know, it's tough.
Absolutely.
Okay. How can listeners engage in art therapy if they are not in the Nashville area or maybe don't have access to an art therapist? What's the best way to sort of like, can you like DIY that?
Can you DIY?
Art therapy?
So yes and no, right? You can do therapeutic art. Art therapy is kind of specific to working with an art therapist who is in some states licensed. All of us have credentials, a national credential from the Art Therapy Credentialing Board. Oh. And so like that's a protected specific title, but therapeutically doing art for catharsis, you know, we love our coloring books.
Coloring books are okay. Sometimes I feel like I'm like a semi-creative person. I would say I'm like I'm not an artist, but I love it, and that's why I want to give this podcast to people. So like people who are like artists, creative people could be like, I can still do it too. Back to coloring books. Sometimes I feel like I'm inadequate if I engage with a coloring book because I'm not creating it myself.
See, I love coloring books. Like sometimes I'm like, I just want something to be pretty. I want something I can guarantee is pretty.
Ooh.
And so then I'm also like, this needs to be the exact brown that it is in real life. But I've always been like that, even as a child. Like I never colored anything other than the way that I had actually seen it in real life.
I love that. She's a realist.
Yeah. It's very, very interesting. I'm like, I could have made it anything, but I was like, Ariel has to have red hair.
Yes. That's awesome. But I like what you said too about you can guarantee with a coloring book that it's going to be cute, that it's going to be pretty. And sometimes I'm like, oh, well, like if I'm doing a coloring book, then it's not good enough because I didn't make it and it's just cheating, all that kind of stuff. And yet I'm going through all these things in my head and I'm not actually creating anything at the end of the day. When over here, you've colored a beautiful Ariel, you know, I've done nothing. So I think, I don't know, we can, and I have a problem a lot too. We can like talk ourselves out of like creating because you're thinking about, oh, well, I don't have this material. Oh, well, if I do a coloring book, then that's not this. And oh, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the day, you just got to make something.
Absolutely. I think like coloring books are good lead into something else. You know, I don't do them a ton, but sometimes when I'm like, I just need to turn my brain off. Like coloring is
Yes.
a nice, but I will say I like just doing like a circle drawing, like starting off with a circle in the center of the page, and then just
more circles,
painting, coloring, drawing, whatever you want in the middle.
Oh, okay. So is it like a blob of color in the middle, or like it can be like a scene?
Anything you want in the middle.
Oh, but like it's a circle. Yeah. How big is a circle?
The border is a circle, however big you want it.
Whoa, fascinating. Okay, this might be a stretch, but have you seen SpongeBob before?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I have.
Do you know that one where I don't know what happens, but it's like Squidward's trying to draw a circle and it's like a squiggly, terrible line, and then SpongeBob draws it and it's like the perfect circle. That made me think of that. So you can do a regular circle, you can do a squiggly circle.
Yeah, I think it's like really based off like the idea of a mandala and like just being mindful.
Oh, cool.
As you're going through the process
and continuing like the around. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. So you can do like shapes or whatever, but
that's fascinating. I didn't even think about that. Wow. Okay. She is a therapist, guys. We talked about kind of the DIY version of art therapy, which isn't really a thing, but you can engage in therapeutic art on your own in many ways. Just wouldn't be a guided experience from a licensed therapist. Do you have any suggestions about like creating time in your schedule to like prioritize that? Because I know like creating art can be tough to do if you're not an artist.
Absolutely. I would say use it as meditation. Like start with it as meditation. I think we're good at meditating for smaller periods of time because we're like, oh, I want to do it, but I also have these things that are hanging over me in the back of my mind. Yes. And that if you start with like 5 to 10 minutes, it then becomes something that you want to do. And so it's easier to step in and be like, okay, well, you know, I'll give myself 15 minutes and don't necessarily have to do it every day. You know, you can say, okay, I'll do an hour this week of something, or I'll work on an ongoing project. And I think ongoing projects are kind of the easiest because you can also see your progress, right? You're like, oh, I'm excited to get back to my blanket because it's halfway done, and also I'm freezing.
It helps.
Yeah.
I'm making a little what is it? Crocodile crochet man. Yeah. He's really cute, and I have done like his head, his body, his arms, and he's wearing overalls and his overalls.
That's cute.
I'm watching a video, it's a whole thing. But now I'm gonna like put it all together next. So that's a great point. And I think you mentioned like consistency, and I feel like I get a lot of anxiety when I think about doing things consistently because we're all busy, we all have a lot of things to do, and I feel like trying to be consistent can end up creating a lot of guilt. Because like you can be consistent for like a week, a month, but can you be consistent for the rest of your life with something like probably, I mean, maybe, but I can't is what I have to say about that. So but I like that you said that we don't have to have a certain amount of time. Like we don't have to be like, okay, every morning at 6, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it for 2 hours and then I'm going to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. No, it doesn't have to be that. It can be, it can fit into whatever.
And it can be 5 minutes long, and it can be a coloring book.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go get a coloring book after this conversation. I don't think I have one right now. Oh. I know. She's judging me. She was like, oh. I'm so sorry. No. I'm so sorry. So does art therapy look like drawing and painting, or can it also look like photography and, you know, blanket making like you mentioned? Is it like pen to paper, or is it wider than?
It is wider than that. Okay. And I'm glad you asked.
Oh. Great.
Because I think it does get like that idea of like, oh, it's on paper. And then I look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, here's your diagnosis. I'm sorry this happened to you. Right. But it really can be, you know, anything with different materials. Like I've worked with photography before, which was really cool.
That is cool.
And being a therapist, I don't necessarily always feel like I have to have all the answers, right? Which for me as a person is very difficult. But me as a therapist, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can come into this space and accept your artistic expression and your expertise in that way and that as your voice without having to feel like I know everything. Because then you can tell me everything and I'm going to have more curiosity.
That's cool. It seems like you are sort of in that discovery, like getting like comfortable, like experience with your patients at the same time. Like you're not like, I have all that questions, and then I'm going to give you all the answers after you say your answer, and I'm going to tell you how it's right or wrong.
Right.
That's super cool, because sometimes people can be a little bit nervous about therapy, thinking like, oh, they're going to like judge me or tell me that I have to change this or change that. But it seems like it's an active like work from like both sides, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the expertise that I'm bringing in is things that I've learned.
Mhm.
Absolutely. But a lot of times, you know, those questions or those dealings become very specific
Mhm.
once you're with, you know,
Mhm.
your client. And so it's really us finding the answer together. Right? This is your experience, and this is what I know about your experience from all of the other people that I've come into contact with, or the books that I read, or all of
Mhm.
the pieces of life. Right? And so together we're kind of coming together to find a way to come to a solution or a resolution or answer that particular question.
That's cool. I love art therapy. Okay. What would you say to someone who says, I'm not creative, I can't do art therapy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The go-to is that you don't have to be an artist to have art therapy. I say start with what you're comfortable with. And I think kind of my growth as an art therapist has been figuring out that dialogue in particular, to like, how do I go from, you know, making it like an umbrella statement of like, you don't have to be an artist. It's okay. Right? Like, okay, I hear that, but like, you're still handing me these materials that I'm unfamiliar with and like telling me to drop my feelings. Right? And so when I'm able to say like, okay, well, what do you do? Are you comfortable with art? When's the last time you made art? Right? Who's a person that you feel creative with? When you feel creative, what is it that you do? Right? And so that brings to the surface a place that people feel comfortable, because sometimes we don't know that what we're doing is artistic. Right? Some things people don't assume are creative or artistic related. They're just like, oh no, I just do this thing. I'm like, okay, well that's creative. Like that takes
Creative
ideas
thinking,
and
even,
innovation. Like that's a creative way of coping or dealing or solving, you know, something. And you know, that it can look like writing, or like you were saying, photography, and it doesn't have to be so
narrowly
in
focused.
a box.
Why do you love art?
It gives me space to like explore different things. Nothing really, I think, resonates with a full kind of aspect of who I am in the same way that art therapy does. Like ecotherapy, at some point I'm going to be like, there's a bug. And we're out here with dirt. And it was really great for the first 15 minutes. But now it's time.
Now I'm done. You can do art indoors. And it is cool that like it is, I don't know, it's just so accessible. Anyone can, you know, do something with something.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so versatile. It's so, like you said, it's forgiving in a lot of ways, and it's like a low barrier to entry. Yeah. I was like, why would my brain say it that way?
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I was actually thinking the same thing, but I was like, she's not going to say that. But she did. Okay, so you own your own practice.
I do.
If anybody's in the Nashville area, how they can connect with you.
Yeah, sure. My practice is called Undivided Whole, and I've been in practice for, oh my gosh, it's been so long.
Really?
I've been in practice since like 2019.
Oh, that rock.
And then when the pandemic happened, I went virtual.
That's so cool. I didn't really realize that art therapy could be virtual, but now it makes sense. I guess it's just like other forms of therapy as well. Yeah. If you've got the art material, you can make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Gillian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I had a great time.
So after reflecting on the conversation with Gillian, I came up with 5 thoughts about how to encourage you to get more crafty. I'm going to share those with you right now. So first is going to be get inconsistent. I think that the idea of being consistent makes a lot of people nervous. It makes me nervous. We may not be able to do art consistently for the rest of our lives. So I want to invite you to get inconsistent with creating art. I think what you can do in terms of getting inconsistent would actually look like giving yourself a consistent invitation to be artistic, but not always, demanding that you take yourself up on that invitation. So that might look like creating a notification in your phone. Every Wednesday night at 8, you give yourself the invitation to be artistic, to get crafty, to do something creative for an hour or so. You can take it or you can leave it, but that option is consistently available to you. So that's a kind of a fun way to think about trying to get consistent, but also being inconsistent at the same time. So yeah. Another tip to encourage you to get more crafty and to think about crafting as self-care is to find an artistic prompt, and specifically find an artistic prompt that is kind of rooted in what a therapist or an art therapist might ask you. So a lot of times when I see a blank page, I get really nervous and I'm like, I don't know what I'm even going to create. But if you can think about, if you're in therapy, what would a therapist ask you? Go ahead and explore that on your canvas. So that might look like, how has the last week been for you? What was one thing that made you smile today? Or even, what is the beach version of me doing right now? Where do I want to go on vacation? So some of those are a little bit like therapy-ish and some of them are not at all. But if you really want to start, digging deep a little bit in your artistic practice, think about some prompts that a therapist might ask you and create art with that. And we're going to be posting on our Instagram some prompts to get you started with some of this art. Next, I would definitely say stop judging yourself. Stop judging yourself and the art you create. It is really about just falling in love with the process. That's why we create art, right? Sometimes I feel like I'll spend a lot of time just like creating something, and then like literally just the other day I had made something that I sewed and I threw it out because I thought it was ugly. But the fun part was just the making of it. So stop judging yourself and just let yourself know that you're here for the process. You're not here for the end result. This doesn't have to look beautiful. And lastly, I would just say edit what you expose yourself to. So if there's anything that makes you feel like bad about the art that you're creating, cut that out. So if you have a friend who's often telling you like, oh, like, haha, like your art sucks, like maybe politely ask them like, hey, could you not talk about that? Or if you follow maybe some artists on Instagram and you love their work, but every time you see it, maybe you get a little like jelly, or like maybe you just makes you feel bad that you're not out there creating stuff. Maybe give them a little unfollow. I know we can give ourselves a lot of excuses and say, oh, like I'm just using them for inspo and inspo and inspo. And then over time, we look at our curated feed and we see like all this inspo has turned into things that make me feel bad about myself. So I would really encourage you to curate what you expose yourself to, whether it's your feed on social media, whether it's the friends that you hang out with, or your family, like whatever. Curate sort of the environment, a really positive environment towards you creating art just for fun and for no reason, not to sell it, not to have people love you for it. Just create art and have a positive environment to do so. Well, those are my tips, and I'm so excited that you guys joined us. Next week, we'll be back with another episode. If you like what you heard today, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and subscribe to the Creative Dirt podcast channel on YouTube. And don't forget, guys, I'm rooting for you. Can't wait to see you next time.